So, but as people are coming in, let me introduce us. I'm Ben Tchoubineh. I'm the president of Phoenix TS, a training and certification provider. We work mainly with the federal government, but also with private sector organizations as well. And we train students in all kinds of different things, but mainly, and our bread and butter really is CompTIA courses. With me is Ned Snow, who is our Chief of Strategy and Marketing, and Chef is going to, and Chief, Chief, not Chef, Chief. And Ned is going to be running the event. We have a couple of things happening, and so Ned's going to be running it. And our speaker, I am so excited to have James Stanger, who is the Chief Technology Evangelist at CompTIA, our prime certification partner. You all know CompTIA is amazing. This technology and sort of training and certification, probably the top certification body in the world. So, James, we're so excited to have you. To get started, though, let's start with our first poll before you start. So, Ned, if you don't mind putting that up, and James has his information on the chat.
To be
Okay.
launched right now.
All right, here we go. What is your current job role? Security analyst, security generalist, IT worker, management, executive, student, or other? If you all could enter in the answer, that would be wonderful. Wow, we have like one of each.
That's cool.
That's pretty cool. So it's like everyone is widely represented here. We have 6 responses for those who respond. We'll give it another just a few seconds. Okay, we have a couple of students and a couple of others. I wonder what those are. Let us know in the chat, the 2 who have answered other. Let us know what the other is. That's interesting. There's only one security analyst. That's hilarious. Okay, information management.
Okay.
All right. I'm gonna submit mine. I'm gonna say management executive. That's me.
Okay, yeah, I just put the results in there. So you got some students, right? Management executive, recording you there. Security generalist.
Operations, okay.
Some operations, okay. Yeah, and if, folks, if you don't have your chat window open that. You just go to at the kind of the top middle, as it were, a little bit to the left. You should see a little thing that says chat. Click on it, and then you can type in there. So how you doing, James Mason? You are still looking for a gig? That's cool. We got Tracy in operations, information management. So you do have a good mix, don't we?
Yeah, and just so you know, before we really got to hand this off because James got to get started. Like at around 2:30-ish, 2:30, 2:35-ish Eastern, so in 30 minutes, we're going to have a raffle because as part of, if you are here present and not watch the recording later, but if you're present, I'm going to have a raffle of a CompTIA exam voucher of your choice. So we're going to use, random number generators and all that stuff to actually have one of you win a CompTIA exam voucher. Isn't that amazing? All right. With that,
cool.
James, it's all yours.
Hey, it's great to be here, folks. Hi, I'm James Stanger, and I represent CompTIA. And we're going to talk today, and it'll be a discussion, by the way. So if you have questions, make sure you put them in the chat window. I don't think you can get yourself off of mute and answer it live, but you can definitely answer it ask it in the chat window. So remember that. And so here we are talking about AI, what it can and kind of what it can't do, but more importantly, where your place is in regards to AI. I couldn't help but use this picture, and I almost have a reason for using it. That is near Chamonix, France, basically near Geneva, and it's barely in France. A beautiful place. That has been that's a glacier you're looking at. That's been receding over time. Unlike AI, which is moving forward over time. But it's something that moves forward slowly, kind of goes back, and AI can winter. And we've seen the AI go through, or at least it's going through the what people will call or is called the Gartner hype cycle. Have you ever heard of that before, folks? Basically, where some form of technology, doesn't matter what it is, 3D printing or Linux back in the day, or the cloud, or AI, or blockchain a few years ago, it kind of goes up into there's some sort of initiating event that it captures the imagination. It goes through the peak of inflated expectations. Then it goes into the trough of despair, they call it. I didn't name that. And then it basically goes into kind of acceptance and use. And Ben and Ned, I mean, we've seen lots of technologies go through that hype cycle. So I couldn't help but think of this glacier here and the idea of wintering. One of the ideas of any new technology is sometimes it takes the world by storm and then you don't hear about it for a while. That's kind of often wintering, and it's like a bear going into hibernation. Then it comes back. So let's talk, though, about what AI can and can't do. And I'm James Stanger. I've been lucky enough to be a company president before. I'm not sure it was lucky or unlucky, but
I know, right?
Yeah, it's kind of interesting. I was in that. But I've also been have work as an active security analyst, and I talk a lot with leaders, C-level leaders around the world. Just last week, I was in the UK where I was talking, for example, to a bunch of folks at a company called UBS Bank. I walked in there. They're called UBS. That's their name. Big, huge bank. And I walked in and said, "Hey, it's great to be here at HSBC Bank." So situational awareness is great. I'm no Mick Jagger, but I remember I watched back in the 80s a Rolling Stones concert, and it was up in Vancouver, Washington, if anybody knows where that is. Sorry, Vancouver, Canada. Jeez, sorry. A little bit of a difference. Vancouver, Canada, and Mick Jagger walked out and said, "Hey, it's great to be in Seattle." And yeah, that was entertaining. So the reason I'm bringing all this stuff up, folks, is I'm a technical person. I understand the business side of things, but more importantly, I represent the research department. So it doesn't really matter what I understand. I'm here to talking to you about what we found at CompTIA concerning AI and security analytics. If you've never heard of CompTIA, we are really the #1 vendor-neutral tech vendor for tech certifications. We don't focus on a particular vendor. I always like to call us vendor plural. We basically teach people how to use a lot of different tools. But let's talk about what it means to develop for you an actionable strategy for using AI to detect and respond to threats faster. And let's talk about what it means to take the steps that organizations are taking, because you're going to hear a lot of things, if you already haven't, about AI. Everybody stormed in, and if you went to RSA San Francisco a couple of years ago, everything was AI. And then you hear stories about companies going, "Oh, well, we're backing off of AI because we're not so sure." Like I said, you've got all of these cycles going on. So I'm hoping with this presentation, I can give you some insights about what working security analysts are doing and how AI can possibly streamline workflows and enhance your decision making. And then some insights into emerging trends in cybersecurity and things. So first of all, how can AI help us? We asked about, I think it was about 500, between 500 and 600 working IT professionals, most of them at the C level. Now take a look at this pie chart. These are the results, and I'm gonna kind of accentuate several of them. Notice those top 3 results. So about 16% said AI is going to make things way bad. And then 22% said it won't be way bad. It'll just make it moderately worse. And so you have kind of this FUD thing going, this fear thing going. Some people saying it might improve, it might make things worse. Okay. Why is that? What's the situation there? What drives these thoughts? Couple of thoughts. I think one of them is if you have a bad tech situation in your company where you have lots of technical debt, and technical debt is basically where decisions that were made a few years ago and then weren't followed up on, or things were implemented a while back in the cloud when the cloud was relatively immature and you haven't matured them. You have kind of a debt that needs to be paid back, needs to be fixed up. If you add AI into the mix of an immature process or thing, it can make things a lot worse. But I thought that was interesting. And I don't want to be a Debbie Downer about AI. I think it's really cool. But I'm just showing you that companies are still kind of trying to figure things out. Because AI, right, has promise, doesn't it? It has unprecedented speed, we think, to identify patterns and draw conclusions and make predictions. And we're seeing this. I remember when AI first stormed in, people, I noticed developers especially, they were interested in it. They wanted to adopt it because they like the idea of using anything that can help them. At first, they were like, it can't really do much. But lately, I've been talking to good seasoned developers, not hobbyists, not managers who used to develop 20 years ago, but people who are in the trenches working right now. They're real interested in it because they see the benefits of it. Now, there's two sides of the coin here. Positive, it can save time, or it might make the time that you're working in easier. And if that didn't make sense to you, it might be this. Hey, it didn't save me my morning. It didn't accelerate my morning tasks, but it sure made it easier to do them. It sure made it more pleasant, less burnout. That could be cool. It's a coworker that provides suggestions. The word guardrails comes up a lot in my discussions. And again, I'm lucky enough to lead roundtables of IT leaders, of IT workers in this around the world. In the last 12 months, I've been on every continent except for Antarctica. For some reason, there aren't too many clients down there. So there's the positive. The negative is it can introduce superficial intelligence nonsense. That's the term I like to use, superficial intelligence. And that usually comes through what I call the CAP model. I stole that from a friend of mine a while back. He often said the CAP model, the copy and paste model. If you're just copying and paste from AI, that ain't going to work. I think there's also a lot of cynical employers out there. I remember a few years ago, a couple of huge corporations laid off like 10,000 workers. And they said, well, because AI, which is ridiculous because we're not really seeing a lot of serious AI implementation at that point. Even now, most companies are still just getting into it. And I'll throw out a first insight. I was talking, I guess I can't name the companies, but one of them makes chocolate, a lot of chocolate. It's not Hershey's, it's another one. That's one company. Another company is in the finance sector, has 3 letters. I asked them, how are you using AI? And the two women who were at the C level, they were both CIOs. One was a CIO, one was a CISO, and they both jinxed themselves, if you know what I'm saying. In England, they'd say snap. In other words, they said exactly the same time, they both said, we're blocking. No, they're blocking AI. Now,
So
that doesn't
they're
mean
not
that
even, not only they're not using it,
they
or they're
block it.
not looking at a governance, maybe policy, they're just ignoring it altogether, or just completely have decided to stay away from it.
They've decided to stay away from it for the time being. They figure it's better to iterate their way in, and that's a word I love. In other words, it's better. The first step of iteration is where they look, let's block it because we don't have policies in place, and we don't even know what a good policy is yet. And this is old information. This is, I think, about a month old.
Yeah,
So
that's ancient, prehistory,
ancient
man. What
in
are
the,
you
in the,
doing?
in the world of that, it's ancient. But I wanted to bring this up because some people, I think, feel that if you don't stampede into AI, then you're lost. I'm one of these that says, no, you need to step into the world of AI in a deliberate way. And these folks, both of these said, and they indicated they're repeating something that I think many more have said. It's like, no, we just need to think it through carefully. So those aren't cynical employers. I think those are smart folks. From a security analytics perspective, we worry about smart false positives and smart false negatives. A false positive, of course, is something that looks like an attack but isn't. A false negative is an attack that doesn't look like one. Both of these are bad. So we're kind of worried about certain things. But the real key here is, and I'm taking long to this point, all companies want to determine the best AI and human interaction. That's just where it's at. Yes, costs are an issue, cybersecurity and privacy concerns, but the main one is how do humans interact in the best possible way? And I stole these 4 things from a guy named Bob Venier. He's the global head of cloud and infrastructure for AstraZeneca. I don't know why I didn't type AstraZeneca in there. If you don't know that company, just Google it. They do tremendous pharmaceutical work. And his job is to help the researchers, the scientists, marketers even, but mostly the researchers. He throws a ton of compute at them. When they ask for the Blackwell chip, when they ask for fancy things, his job is to data set and the cloud to bear. And he talked about these 4 ways in which people interact with AI. And I think we all know this, but I'm not sure I have ever seen somebody put all 4 of those on the same page together. And I think it has to do with how security analysts need to interact with AI. Co-piloting, general knowledge, productive use, and agentics. Ben, have you seen that outlined that way before?
Well, actually, the first time I saw it was last night when we went over this
Oh,
together, and
okay.
I thought that was
Okay.
really really interesting because it does kind of split it up into okay, these are the places where I need to be looking at, right? So from an analyst standpoint, I could be, I need to have a perspective of where I need to be looking out for threats coming, or I don't know, traffic or whatever that the analyst is
Heck yeah.
looking at. So
Mhm.
in that term, from a decision making perspective, agentics is something I'm looking at for our
Yeah.
organization, but really
Yeah.
to like automate simple tasks, not for it to take over a human's job, because I don't, people are worried about their jobs. I don't know. I don't think that we're anywhere near that.
I don't think we are. Again, I think there are cynical companies that are going to justify some sort of decision to up their stock price so that they
Yeah.
get rid of 10,000 workers and then they call it AI. Again, that makes me kind of mad whenever, because I saw people do that with the cloud. Oh, we've moved to the cloud, therefore we don't need these workers. It's like you haven't even moved to the cloud yet. But this was a few years ago. So co-piloting is the idea that a security analyst basically gets a bunch of cybersecurity threat intelligence information, stuff that she has to read and it takes a long time. Well, why not have AI create a summary of it? That's co-piloting. Um, General knowledge is the idea that you ask whatever Oracle at Delphi. I've been using Claude lately, ChatGPT, Claude, whomever. But the idea that you can make a query and it'll come back with an answer. The general knowledge thing worries me because, frankly, I don't know if you've ever ego surfed yourself, but I did it a while back, and I got wonderful results. It took away my PhD, which is fine because it was a PhD in unemployment, British Romantic literature, and it gave me, I think, an MBA and a bunch of certs that I never earned. So I was very happy about that. But so that'll get better. But then there's productive use. The idea is that you interact and basically say, "Hey, ChatGPT, create me some Python code for a particular purpose." See, that's productive use. Whether that code's any good or not is another question. And then there's agentics. That's where you have some code. Let's say you've created some code and you've created a bunch of variables. Well, you could ask an agent to go, can you go through all of the variables that I've created in the code and see if I've introduced a cybersecurity problem or what have you. So those are the 4 different ways. So there's Copilot, for example. That's taken from my keyboard right over here. Uh, the computer shipped with Microsoft Copilot on it. And of course, you don't have to use Copilot for copiloting, but that's an example. Another example, this is where I asked in a general knowledge way, who is James Stanger? And it came back with some pretty good answers, but let's see, both of those books I've never read. In fact, I've never even seen them. Um, um, Here is productive use. I needed to check a web server, its uptime, and it created a nice little script for me in Python. Why not? And this here, if you can see it, on the left is the code that a friend of mine created. And then on the right is where Mark took an agent and said, hey, I need you to go to work on this and check for some problems, specifically for cybersecurity problems. And the agent went off and I think about 20 minutes later came back with some useful kind of suggestions. There were 4 suggestions. One of them was pretty useful. The rest of them were kind of silly. Whether or not that was the agent was trained properly or not is another question and all that. But I just wanted to throw out some of those examples, folks. And this is I'm getting deeper a bit into the idea of what I call the X factor interstice. And interstice is just a fancy way of saying the space between the AI and the human. And if we figure that out as security analysts, we engage in a dialogue. And the reason why you're looking at that hoary face there, that bearded face there, that's Socrates. Sorry, just kidding. For those of you who know, what is that Socrates from? What's that, Ben? Was that from Bill and Ted's Excellent Adventure? They called Socrates
Probably.
Socrates.
Oh, yeah,
It's all about
probably.
dialogue. Socrates taught about the importance of dialogue. That is, two interested and honest people get together. So Ben, hopefully that's you and me, or hopefully
Hopefully.
folks, that's you as a security analyst and AI, get together, you engage in a dialogue, and that dialogue between two people can create something special. This picture is designed to show two people either looking at each other, or what do you see, Ben, besides the two people looking at each
Oh,
other?
the white vase or whatever
Yeah, the vase
the
there. Yeah, the
lens.
white.
Yeah, the
Yeah,
lens.
yeah.
Yeah.
And the idea is that there's something special, right? Covenant, there's something special in terms of a product, something that's commercially useful, or something from a security analyst that is a viable solution comes out of it. So where do AI and humans work out? And my first story about that, I'll make it quick. There's a folklore hero, John Henry, who actually did live in the late 19th century. And John Henry got in the, remember this, Ben? The story. John Henry, it was a competition between him and a steam drill to drill a hole through a tunnel. Do you remember this story? Do you remember?
Yeah, yeah, yeah,
It's a
yeah, yeah,
song, right?
yeah.
Do you remember who
Yeah.
won? Do you remember who
No,
won?
no, no, I don't.
John Henry.
I have vague.
Okay, John Henry. Well, ask ChatGPT; it'll tell you. I think. Uh, uh, John Henry won, but lost. He won the competition, but he died of a heart attack immediately thereafter because he exhausted
Oh,
himself.
wow. Rusted
Now,
himself.
the reason why he won is the machine kept breaking down. And while it broke down, he kept working. And when he got tired, the machine would go, but he would go and catch up. But then he finally won. Now, if John
Hmm.
Henry had thought to himself, you know what? I have expertise that that machine does not. That machine can do brute force stuff. It can drill really well. But I can direct it in such a way. And I have a modern day example of that. It's not about security analytics, but we're getting there. Um,
Well, I'm
yeah,
thinking of what I'm dealing with right now with AI,
yeah.
and it's so frustrating. And maybe I'm being John Henry, and I really need to figure out how to work with my AI. But I'm developing a web page or an application,
Oh, cool.
and I'm gonna develop an application with only AI, with no coding whatsoever. And it is very frustrating. It is not as easy as people, make it out to be, like on YouTube videos.
Yeah.
No, no, no. It just you fix one thing and it breaks something else. Then you got to go fix that thing and it breaks something else. So it's really very frustrating. And
I
really, I
hear.
think if I was a better coder, and that combination of if I were to code and at the same time also use the AI, it probably would help a lot more. I mean, that's what
It's
I'm
a really
thinking.
good. It's a really good point. I think that no code, low code. I suppose I'm more of a low code person. If you can start with a bit of code and then engage in the dialogue that way, I think you've got less of a John Henry moment and something more of a
Yeah,
Socratic moment where there's a good dialogue.
that's right.
That's a good example, and I think that's happening very much, starting to happen very much with security analysts here. So because the promise of AI is curated content, you can detect patterns, you can sift through data and model behavior. That picture there I put in there because that is of, let's see if that's the right picture. That's of Sandy's broken arm, my wife's broken arm. Uh, that picture had an AI agent, and the AI agent suggested to the doctor also that Sandy either has, what's it called when your bones are going away? What's it called?
Osteoporosis?
Thank you, osteoporosis or cancer, which was very
Mm. Oof.
alarming to her, to both of us. Uh, she doesn't, so they checked it. We've checked it out. The AI suggested one of two things, and in fact, it was osteoporosis. We've known that for some time. That's how she broke her arm. But I just thought I'd bring in there the idea that the doctor was the interest, had an interest with this image and AI. And AI suggested one of two things. One was very incorrect, thankfully. One was absolutely correct. This is what I mean earlier, I think, when I used the word guardrails, that the doctor was kind of given a guardrail, but the doctor needed training to sift through it and do it right. So let's go into security and security analytics specifically. We asked about 600 people um, what one thing is going to improve cybersecurity moving forward. And end user training actually only got 12%. Notice they said application security, the biggest one was focusing on data, and that's probably right because of things, Ben, because of like privacy concerns and
Sure.
GDPR in Europe and in US, other things, but network
Well,
monitoring.
that's the big treasure, right? The data. So you got to
It
protect
is.
that.
Yeah. So this is interesting to me. So it centers on analytics and data. So what can AI do for analysts then? Now, couple details here, and I'll go very quickly over these. So, Ben, these 5 things were taken from a cybersecurity report from a very, very large cloud provider. And this is their internal information. So these are 5 areas that they're really interested in automating and using AI on, because they are the most severe levels that keep coming up as a problem. So big cloud provider. Active Directory, number 1. And this is something I've heard from banks as well. So take a step out of tech company world and bring up your finance world. Active Directory, just the attack surface there is very juicy. Why? Because once you've got Active Directory, you kind of own everything. You can get to the data, you can get to the users, you can get to the applications. Identity access management, misuse of storage. Developers, for whatever reason, not being able to use HTTPS properly. So forget post-quantum cryptography. They can't get they can't get pre-quantum cryptography going. Yeah. So, so the 4th and 5th ones, default keys being used on the serverless computing platforms. 5th, message delivery. A lot of this messaging stuff, whether it be AWS or Azure or what have you, server-side encryption not being set. So these are some of the problems, Ben. I just wanted to give a sense of what the problems were before we talked about how to use AI and security analytics to identify them. Okay. Another problem has to do with APIs. APIs, the way I look at APIs, they're kind of like a menu that you choose things from. Or a waiter even. You don't go to a restaurant usually and walk into the kitchen and ask for something. You'll probably get something thrown at you. But you do send the waiter in or waitress in to be that interface. So there's the typical API process. And here's what can go wrong. This is another major issue in addition to those 5 issues, Ben.
Yeah, so if you go back, actually, this is really, to me, I read an article about it in of LinkedIn just actually a few days ago about how organizations are pretty good at securing their people, but not very good at securing their non-people, which are these applications that are communicating in the background, and they're just doing a lot of work in the background, talking to each other, usually with a static API key, which is their password, that doesn't change, right? So we're always like doing, multi-factor authentication, changing your password all the time, all that stuff when we're trying to log in people. But then applications talk to each other all the time with a static key, and that is a huge exposure issue apparently. And what he was saying, some numbers that were really crazy. I wish I remembered the name of the author, but that there are something like 10 to 20 times more non-people to protect in an organization than people. And security analysts just usually don't even have, it's not even on their radar.
We don't have visibility into it because it's really hard for us to even sift through the amount of that data. Humans can't do it. They just can't. And AI is hopefully something that is going to bring about the ability to augment humans to get that ability. I'm glad you brought that up about keys, because I just read something, it was in Slashdot, where they're looking to do key lengths. Not key lengths, key expiration. Do you remember back when we first created the certificates and things like that? You kept them alive maybe infinitely or for 5 years, 3 years, 2 years. They're talking about months now. Shortening it, weeks, days, shortening it here because of that very reason, that one of the other attack surfaces besides Active Directory is the keys, the session keys and things that people are being able to crack easier, because there's the ability to brute force has become democratized. In other words, it only was available to the huge governments or huge corporations. Now a lot of people have access to that capability. And that's why you're having that. So curation, how do we curate through the Active Directory problems, through what you were just talking about, the TLS? I'm glad you brought that up. I wish I'd emphasized that more now. That's really good. Is the idea that we all know about the CIA triad: confidentiality, integrity, and availability. And I don't mean to be dismissive, but I will say this: the integrity side of things seems to be, with AI, receiving a lot more emphasis in terms of security analytics. It's not a new area, but it's a new area of emphasis in the age of AI, because it's one thing to make AI unavailable, to do ransomware on it or what have you. But I think the thing that most people are interested in right now is finding ways to manipulate it, to modify it illicitly. If I'm an attacker bringing down NASDAQ or a stock exchange, interesting. How about manipulating it so that I become a gazillionaire with millions of dollars, right?
Right.
The integrity side of things is a big deal. The other thing that I think is, and this is me being a little facetious, but not so much. I'm pretty serious about this. Maybe there's a new CIA triad for analytics. It's correlation, it's curation, it's you identify and you do analytics. I think that this is where the Splunks of the world come in. I think that's really important. So what is
Okay, so
practical?
let's stop here because this is really interesting. If you go
Yeah,
back to that slide, and we're
you
going
bet.
to stop right there because this whole new paradigm that you're creating, the new CIA, that's huge, right? Correlation, and we want
I
to know
love
what
this
that
one.
is.
Yeah, yeah.
Yeah, I know, right? So we want to know what this means. And you're going to tell us right after our little break here. So right
Okay.
now, we're going to do our raffle. This is exciting. Now, again, I have the names of, and I have everybody's names in an Excel spreadsheet. And it's like 54 names. And there are only about 20 participants right now here. So you have to be here to get this CompTIA exam voucher of your choice. That's huge, right? So I'm going to use, because everyone's in a row in an Excel spreadsheet. So I'm going to use the Google random number generator, and I'm going to generate a number, and I'm going to look up in the spreadsheet, and I'm going to name the name of the person in the spreadsheet. If you're
Cool.
here, please put your, say I'm here in the chat, and then we'll tell you what to do. If not, we'll do 1, 2, 3, and then if you're not, we'll do it again until, okay, all right. So I have a number and a name, and that is going to be Glenn Phillips at MDTA. Is Glenn Phillips here? Yes, Glenn is here because I've seen Glenn
He's
do
got
some
some great comments. Yeah.
chat
So
commenting, right?
yeah.
So Glenn, can you just text again to say that you're here? Um, and because I
Let's
know
see.
you were
Maybe we
here.
lost him. Hopefully not. Yeah. Yeah.
No, Glenn's here. I can see it I can see
Oh,
Glenn
good.
in the list of participants. Um, but maybe Glenn is not actually here right now. I
Yeah.
hope Glenn isn't taking a
It's
bathroom break
possible.
right now.
Yeah. Yeah.
So no, but I see Glenn Phillips. So we're gonna make sure we go to Glenn and because I know that Glenn is here and give them the the CompTIA exam voucher. So I see Glenn
Congratulations,
logged
Glenn.
in. So congratulations, Glenn. You probably are missing this. You're probably on a
Yeah.
break, but
Hopefully not.
we don't. Yeah, yeah, yeah. But we wouldn't want you to lose out on this because I see your name on here. So in any
One of
case, so
the.
Glenn, congratulations. Should we put up the
Yeah. Good
second
idea.
poll, Ned? Let's put
You
up the
bet.
second poll.
Yeah, absolutely. Let's see, it's loading up right now, and survey says, let's launch it. Here we go.
All right. So are you currently using AI? If so, how? So everyone, please respond. Oh, I want to use AI agents. Somebody's saying I use AI agents. You can see in the chat, hopefully you can see it update live. And I want to know if it's other, then what is other? Tell us in the chat. And to conduct research, ooh, that's interesting. Do you trust the results? Um, there are actually tools that are focused on AI research that give you the actual references and everything. Summarize meetings, yeah, a lot of people are using that. Very interesting. So the people who said other, what do you use it for? I've been using it to generate code and
Yeah.
unsuccessfully, so that's going to be my answer.
So we have some agentic use here. I had to use the word agentic. I think you get paid extra by
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
the AI
And
police
and, and
if
I
you.
see Glenn. Yeah. So you're responding to Glenn, but I
I
hope
was
hope
responding to Glenn,
it's
so
actually
hopefully
still
he.
here. Glenn, are
Yeah.
you back? I don't know. You just won the raffle, but anyway, we'll email it to you. Um, in any case, okay. So we got our results. Let's find out correlation, identification, analysis.
So the idea is that if you're using agents or if, what have you to generate code or et cetera, how do you go about curating that? And this is an example where I brought in, there's CloudWatch, there's Sentinel. You could use open source tools like Waza and Snort, things like that. You could use other tools, but the question is, how do you go about doing this kind of work? Where does AI fit in as you ingest the data, as you normalize and mine the data, and to aid in searchability and in visualization? I think those are the key areas. Now, for some people, and I want to say this, AI has been used for years. The naive Bayes algorithm, and there's the reason that picture, that black and white picture there that's Mr. Bayes. He was I think a Methodist preacher back in the 17th century who came up with that algorithm that we use in our spam filters every day. But when it comes to threat hunting and AI, or at least analytics, I would say, Chris Cochran has helped me understand that. He says, I like it because it helps me avoid the security alert dance. And I love that phrase. I wish I'd come up with that. Chris has done work as a security analyst for the NSA, for Netflix, for Hunter's Labs. So I like that. So the idea, and I'll go ahead and get into some examples here in just a sec. Kat Self, who works for MITRE, did you hear that weird news about how the federal government is looking to cancel the CVE, the Common Vulnerabilities and Exposures Database feed? It's kind of weird, but she says she uses AI to help build hypotheses. And I think this is interesting because I've talked to many security analysts, and they say right now, we don't really use a lot of AI, certainly not ChatGPT, directly in our work. Does it help suggest things and help us get up to speed? Yes. But it's still about augmentation and help there. Now, I used, I think, a phrase earlier, superficial intelligence. If I didn't, forgive me. I think you hear a lot of things. And a lot of these things help me make me drink a lot more Diet Coke because it frustrates me. I've heard people say this. I was in Europe last year. All cybersecurity analytics will be replaced in 2 years, this person said. They lived in a very nice office. They should know better than saying these things. The help desk has already been replaced by AI. Software development will be replaced in 2 years. It's always 2 years, or it's almost always 3 to 5 years, they say. Now, I bring up this Coca-Cola example because this person here, she reports to the board of Coca-Cola. She talked to me about how they need security analysts more all the time. So Coca-Cola doesn't think so. This person is from the fintech sector. If anybody, I don't know if you get your insurance, Ben, from State Farm, but he's a CISO at State
I'm a
Farm.
Geico and Travelers guy.
Geico and Travelers. Hey, good for you. My dad sold Travelers insurance for decades.
Nice.
He's the one that allowed me to get a college education so I could buy a 1975 Land Cruiser that you and I were talking about. So this guy hires security analysts all the time. He doesn't see it. ISACA, we're CompTIA, but ISACA, they just came out with a security analytics cert. They certainly wouldn't do that if they thought they were going away. I've visited security analysts in incident response teams from Cyprus to Japan to the UK, Google, there's Japan, in Tennessee. What is that? Is that the Mark Center, I think, in Washington, D.C., and Singapore? None of them think that's happening. Okay, I just wanted to say that. So let's talk about products. SentinelOne, Darktrace, and Threat Hunter AI. I'm just using these as examples. It's not an official endorsement or anything. But SentinelOne really has focused on AI-enabled detection, and they look for bad behavior. Ben, I don't know if you're a parent, a dad, or not.
I am. I have 2 kids.
You got 2 kids. I've got 4. So you're 2 ahead of me. Just kidding. My kids are going to kill me for that one. As a parent, do you have a signature, a name for every piece of bad behavior you've seen in your kids? I don't.
No,
I don't know.
I do not.
I don't know. Yeah. But when you
my kids are perfect, man. My kids are perfect.
Oh no! What am I saying? What am I? What
they
am
don't
I
have
thinking?
any bad behavior. Just kidding. I'll tell you later. Shh, this is being recorded.
I'm offending Dan. When there's bad behavior in my kids, I don't know the name. I just know bad behavior when I see it.
Yeah.
I know, at least what I see it. My point is that AI is helping organizations move away from that signature based to more heuristic forms of detection. And heuristic, that's a word used in analytics, and it's the idea that anomaly based detection. That, look, I can't identify that signature, and I don't really rely on a signature database as much as I create a normative element. And AI is really quite good. LLMs are quite good at that.
So
Dark
interesting
trace. Oh,
because
yeah.
this is huge because I didn't know about this, right? So because I've been too busy trying to get my AI to develop stuff for me, but the and unsuccessfully. But so heuristic detection, does that mean that there's going to be no such thing as a 0-day attack? Because 0-day means that I don't have its
Mhm.
signature, right? What does that really mean?
It will cut down on them more and more. It really will. But I would argue that there are a lot of root causes for why 0-day attacks are so effective. And I think that is the holy grail for any security analyst, is to reduce the likelihood of 0-day attacks and reduce the toxic combinations that lead to those sorts of situations.
Interesting.
That's really the key. And like Dark Trace, they talk about, yeah, it's built on AI, it's proactive, they focus on endpoint security, but again, they use the word correlation, and that goes back to my idea of curation, that new CIA triad, and to augment the team. Now, I was talking to a chief technology officer at a large MSSP, managed service security service provider. And there's like, well, the cybersecurity tooling companies out there like these have been, working with AI for years. But the real thing is, I think, if you focus on the idea of the human in the loop, it's really important. This same person said, I would suggest that in a lot of incident response that she's participated in, the data was there, and most of the time the alerts were there, but the humans were the failure point. So it's still, even as we have been making glacial progress in AI, there is still very much the OODA loop: observe, orient, decide, act. OODA.
Mhm.
So it really is that human failing point in identifying 0-day activities, 0-day kinds of causes, that I think is the big deal. And it really comes down to where AI begins, where humans leave off, and things like that. But it also has to do with what I call the interstice again, where two technologies, whether it be an end user, that's one technology, your brain, and ChatGPT, when there's a connection there, that can be manipulated. That's why you have AI pen testing, for example, and input validation and things, and where that information goes to
Okay,
what
so
you.
what do you mean? What can be manipulated?
One of the things that can happen is the idea of, actually, as people are using AI, people do a similar injection type attack. So you think you're talking to the AI, but you're talking to some sort of
Oh,
other
that's interesting.
LLM, and you get bad information.
Okay.
So that kind of input validation. But there's also, even if you are talking to a legit AI, uh, what does that really, what useful does that conversation create?
Mhm.
You also have agents and endpoints becomes a big deal. There's an example. Let's see if I can not mess the example up, because it's very relevant to security analysts. When you set an agent in motion, the agent's kind of like a little terminator. It will go over. How should I put this? It will try to problem solve and find information about what you told it to do, and it won't stop it much unless you tell it to stop at certain things. So what we'll do, for example, there's some companies that, and let's see if I can get this right, they will block storing of AI data on their desktop, but they have no problem with you going and using a web browser to go up and do AI interactions, because that way it's not stored on a desktop. This is in organizations where there's compliance, and they don't want a lot of data on desktops because that can lead to exposure of personally identifiable
Sure.
information. So I don't know if that helps.
Yeah, yeah. And I think, in so many ways, at least in terms of my interaction with my AI buddy, I've named my AI, have you named your AI buddy yet? Because my AI buddy's name is Sam. I actually asked him to
Good.
name himself. But anyway, in my interactions, it's interesting that you kind of hit some limits there, right? That are kind of built into the model, right?
Mhm.
But you can also kind of change the mode so that there's no limits, right? And then some really interesting information comes out, and it's like, okay, what are you
Yeah,
saying? So I'm assuming when you have a larger organization that has a lot of compliance requirements, whether you're in the government
very
or a
much so.
government contractor of some sort,
Mhm.
like for example, I'm in the CMMC world, and there's a lot of compliance
Oh,
requirements with
yeah.
CMMC. And so, I deal a lot with that in that regard. I would imagine that the information that comes to you from AI can become a source of compliance problems as well. That's interesting.
It can. It can. And either the information that you get and depending on where you store it. And in one case, you had an organization that is using agents, and the agents were coming across a situation where they couldn't find the information on the web. So what they did, in order to get the information and to be able to process it, like they were told to go do, they went and downloaded information and put it all over people's desktops, even though it was against policy. So there were people that ended up with this information on their computers. They didn't know it was there. So it was kind of a shadow IT situation. It's like, well, I didn't know that stuff was deposited on there. But the agents did it. They were doing their job. So see, you have a situation where agentic AI in that case can be a problem. Is it always a problem? Well, no, but it just there are serious issues that need to be thought through in
And the
terms
more
of
agents we have now, because even as a small business, we're a small business, but we're looking at possibly using agentic AI to automate some menial tasks, right? But
why
now
not?
we have more of those non-people that have to be secured, and we just cannot conceptualize
Yeah.
that.
And the problem is they're non-people that act more like people. So so
Or they
so
could do
now
it a lot faster and a lot more,
yeah,
so.
yeah. And it's much more proliferated. And one of the things that's really common about AI, there's so many layers to AI, it's becoming increasingly democratized. The idea of using an agent just a few years ago was, I mean, that's real Star Trek or Star Wars or whatever. It ain't so Star Wars now. It's becoming democratized. So I wanted to bring that up. There's a question I was asked last week from these bank folks. They said, can AI be used for ransomware attacks, specifically on crucial infrastructure on Active Directory? And again, Active Directory, I get asked that a lot, various questions. And well, part of my answer was, well, here is a screenshot of a very common tool called Metasploit from Kali Linux, where they actually went after Active Directory. This is a person who did this. That's something I teach people how to do that. It's really very simple once you learn how to use it. And this grabbed a ticket. There you go. That is a credential that's been grabbed. So my answer to this is, first of all, do you understand how Active Directory can be nailed? Is it through Kerber roasting? That's a specific technique of it. And there's a bunch of others. I'm not really good at math, but I think there are 8 others in addition there to there. The question becomes, as a security analyst, do you set agents, whatever, if you use Vectra AI? Vectra AI is a great tool. Do you use that to help profile how privileges are escalated? Or if it's called bloodhound reconnaissance. It's a way of discovering how your Active Directory system works. So the question is, how do you profile that? And you can go to MITRE ATT&CK and check out all the ways in which Active Directory gets profiled and attacked and things. But there's Vectra AI that does a pretty good job in doing that. And I was conscious in this presentation to come up not just with theoretical architectural stuff or just a few analogies about John Henry, but specific tools that could be used and seem to be pretty good, at least from my experience. Some people were asking last week, what are some of the best tools and technologies use cases on the market for cybersecurity? One of my first ones is report writing. And this goes back to my ancient history. The first time I was hired as a working cybersecurity professional was to write the reports of pen testers and security analysts because they didn't want to write. Most don't. That's still 25 years later, they still don't. And it seems to me that's what's happening more and more. One of the uses of AI is report writing, and they don't write the reports for you. If you're having AI write your reports for your pen test or your security analyst, you're going to get replaced. You just are. You're blowing it. But guardrails and reminders like, hey, your audience is non-technical. It could be you're writing a report for somebody in management. Well, guardrails to help you do that. Another thing I thought I'd bring up is Ansible Lightspeed. I like what they're doing here. Ben, Ansible, infrastructure as code. Using a
Right.
line of code that's about as big as a screen, you can update 1,000 instances of something in the cloud.
Right.
Pretty cool. It's been around for what? How long has Ansible been around? About 30 years? 25 years?
Like, I mean, as long as I remember, really, yeah.
Yeah. I like the
Because
idea.
as I'm only
Oh,
25 anyway, so
oh, that's
yeah,
oh, well, see, yeah,
exactly.
I'm only 24, so
Yeah.
yeah. Uh, I like the idea of taking a mature tech, which Ansible's a good one, and combining it with AI. I'm not saying Lightspeed is necessarily ready for prime time or what have you, but I love any technology that basically marries a very mature way of doing things and then says, hey, AI can do a better job, or at least improve. And they're saying with this that 70% of code can be automatically generated, and playbooks, Ansible uses playbooks, can be created faster. True or not, I don't know. I don't know if people would lie this much. So it's an interesting idea, nevertheless. And I thought I'd bring that in there. I'll bring that
Actually,
up.
go back if you don't mind.
You bet, man.
Um, so what you're saying here is, okay, AI, which I think we're all kind of aware of that, and there's an awareness that AI is used for us to become more efficient,
Yeah,
but not necessarily to replace us.
not necessarily.
I have the analogy of, before my, if I didn't have my washer and dryer, I'd have to wash my clothes by hand. I'd have to put them in a big basket, put them on the top of my head, and walk down to the river. And and they kind of go back to the 1700s or something. I don't know,
Yeah,
but
yeah,
but now I have my washer and dryer. It's washing it, and I just kind of do other things. But I still am gotta hit the settings and decide what kind of wash it is, and I have to put the clothes in and those kinds of things. And it is my decision when I want to wash my clothes, which according to my wife is not often enough. So I think so that analogy, I think for now AI needs
yeah,
us to become more efficient, and based on the kinds of things you've just taught us here today, um, there are specific things as an analysts that we need to focus on,
yeah,
which is very interesting. We got 6 more minutes.
yeah.
Um, if
Yeah.
you want to kind of finish up with some points, and by the way, if
You bet.
anybody here has questions, go ahead and put them in the chat, and we can try to also as James is finishing up, we can try to answer your questions as well. Go ahead.
You bet. One of the things I wanted to bring up was the idea of what's called a generative adversarial network, a GAN. And the idea is that in this type of network, they're using large language models. And the idea is that you set up a situation, and many products already have this going. They have something called a generator, and it basically creates data, transforms it, and this data could be images or videos or network traffic and things. And it's motivated to create false information. So it takes kind of noise and it starts creating things. And these
Hmm.
things could be, where a deep fake is created. Well, then there's a discriminator as part of this GAN. So it's a two-headed beast. And the discriminator is the truth sensor, if not a truth teller, but a truth sensor. And what it does is it basically takes a look at these generator samples and then it compares what the generator has done and it compares it to a real piece of data or real pieces of data.
Okay,
And
so
then,
that brings up
yeah,
where does the real piece of data come from?
it's a good question. That's where when you hear the idea of training, well, you have to train your AI. You train your discriminator based on data that you as a human being, and this is your point about the human in the loop or the augmentation, that the human decides is valid data, valid network traffic, valid images, valid
Hmm.
videos, things like that.
Oh my gosh.
And
So
and
if I
this
if I decide what's real, who's gonna check my work? Because I don't trust myself.
well, you're the company president. I've always been taught to say yes, sir. So
Yeah,
yeah,
yeah, yeah,
but
yeah.
but
If
but
only, if
yeah,
only we knew what we were doing as
if
president.
only.
Yeah.
But you've got a really good point. It has to do with some sort of true north has to be set at some point. When I say true north, what is accurate? What is proper? What is important? So the idea behind this GAN is that so there's training data at the top there where you have real samples, the training data. the discriminator then takes a look at this, and the generator then creates them. And you kind of have these kind of loops where information is kind of created, and the discriminator looks at it and goes, no, that's not right. And then it goes back, and the generator goes, okay, I didn't create that image just right. So I will add a few pixels. I will take away a certain elements. And eventually you have a generator that can create data that even the discriminator can't tell the difference between.
Wow.
Now, this can be used in various ways for attacking or defense.
Right. And this is these terms, knowing these terms alone, I think, is important for us moving forward, because when you start looking at software to purchase or use in your organization, and they say we have a discriminator this or generator that, we have to use training data. We kind of understand now what that could mean. Wow, this is very interesting.
And so you can ask these questions. I think one of the things as a security analyst is, if AI is coming back to you and making certain suggestions, one of the things as a security analyst you need to kind of ask is not so much how has this been trained. To get a little bit deeper into it, it's like, well, where are the samples coming from? Where is the random noise coming from? Where are things being improved, and how is that working? This helps you to be a better consumer, either of the software to purchase it, or a better consumer of the software as it's in action. I think knowing this background is something that you need to have, and it's one of what I would call, and I guess we're kind of our time is about up. There are a lot of layers involved in AI. There's a hardware layer. Anybody who's tried to buy a GPU lately and how expensive they got knows the hardware layer. There's the software layer, the applications, the cloud. And then there's the data layer. But I think there's additional layers involved here. And in this case, the layers you're looking at the data layer here, but you're also looking, I think, at what I would call that layer of interaction. I call it the interactive layer. And that's really what we've centered this webinar on, is how can you best interact with that and understand that. So I'll close with that. Now there's what I'll do is I can go very quickly, and forgive the whiplash effect here, because there were a bunch of other things we could talk about. But we have something called the Building AI Strategy Report. It's free at CompTIA. And it's basically input from thousands of working managers, IT professionals about using AI. So there's a resource there. Another thing at CompTIA, we do have the AI Essentials course that any good security analyst could take. That helps you do a good review of things. There's my LinkedIn. I already put that in there, but here's where you can download the slides if you want. And
there you go.
Ben, you can. And if you don't want to do it that way, Ben, you can certainly send that link, because some people don't trust QR codes, and I know.
We're security analysts here. Security people is like, ooh, do not scan QR codes.
And so here I am doing it.
QR
so,
left and right. Yeah.
But
anyway, yeah. So please go ahead to here, or we will be sending out the recording of this thing and the slides to everyone. So thank you for those who actually came to this. Glenn, I hope you hear this and you weren't able to use the chat maybe, but anyway, I guess if not, and you had left, you're going to get a surprise. And again, thanks everybody. Thank you, James. This was amazing. I learned so much, honestly. Thank you. You're really cool. And cool. Great. I know. Super cool, really. And we'll definitely bring you back for some more interesting webinars. Everybody, thank you. Thank you very much, and have a great rest of your day. All right. I'm going to end the event now. Alrighty.
Thanks, Ben. Bye.